So hey guys, in this video we'll talk about the rise, the fall, and basically everything else that you need to know about Food Dudes. As our previous Food Dudes is a school-based healthy eating program that was in fact designed to get children to eat more fruits and vegetables by making it fun, social, and rewarding. That was in fact developed by behavioral psychologists at Bangor University in the late 1990s. This was in fact based on the idea that children will copy role models and repeat behaviors that are rewarded, pretty much getting them into a daily basis thing that they'll be easily rewarded on a daily basis. Pretty much treating children like dogs, if you think about it, because this is kind of similar to how you would train your dog to do certain actions. And on top of this, we in fact watch short animations and short live actions that are pretty much called food dudes, who basically get powers by eating fruits and vegetables while fighting junk bugs, which you can talk about a little bit more later. But first, let's in fact talk about the whole history of food dudes, whereas in fact started in the late 1990s at Bangalore University, whereas in fact started to be developed and go to early trials, where in the early 2000s it was rolled out nationally across Ireland, where it's pretty much one of, if not the most widely used nutritional programs in Irish primary schools, and still used in some schools and regions today, but in a much more updated and localized form. But however, the idea still carries on. And this is where in the 2000s, the UK started to in fact pick up on it and go to the experimental phase, just to see if it actually worked. When they started in fact do pilot schemes in certain parts of England and Wales, just to see if it actually worked. When in the mid to late 2000s, they of course started to do a wider rollout. This basically often funded by the local council, the NHS, and of course many other public bodies, pretty much encouraging the reduction in obesity rates and an increase in being a lot more healthier and a lot more fitter. But however, it was actually starting to decline around the 2010s due to funding cuts, where basically some schools and local authorities still run it if they still have the funding for it. But however, some other authorities and some schools that cannot fund it, unfortunately still not run it. But however, the idea is still good, encouraging children to eat fruits and vegetables to reduce morbid obesity and therefore making healthier generations for the future coming, which seems to be a really good fucking idea. But however, you may go like, how does it work? Well, it's simple. Every single day, children were often given out small portions of fruits and vegetables, which are usually rejected. These are often peppers, celery, cucumbers, or tomatoes. So any fruit that you normally hate, they were often given to children every single day to be strongly encouraged to pretty much take a bite out of, not force feeding it, which is quite ironic because in my perspective, yes, I participated in it. It kind of felt as if they were force feeding it to myself. But while you were eating the fruit, they were also watching food do videos, where basically it started off with the live action, but however it switched over to the animation later down the line, where basically by 2013 any content posted on YouTube is pretty much just cut. So yeah, we don't know what happened right after, but who cares? Pretty much, these were both uploaded not only from the website that is shut down, but however, you can still access the website on the Wayback Machine. But however, for the new website, you can still access it, but only on the Ireland port. The UK one does not exist no more. That's the only one you have to access via the Wayback Machine. But however, these were often short episodes, and pretty much these episodes that heroes eat foods and veg, and villains eat junk food. Basically, increase our excitement and peer pressure in a positive way. And then in return, they were given stickers, certificates, pencils, even small prizes for pretty much tasting the fruit, finishing the portion of the fruit, and also constant participation within the program, where basically some classes had charts or posters to track progress of the students just to see how healthy they are, and on top of this also see how much fruit they in fact tried. Where basically even the whole school was involved. By the way, this is not only the teachers encouraging the students. This is a wide project. The basically teachers, dinner staff, and even parents were in fact briefed based on the food dude study, where they in fact encouraged the student, they encourage themselves, encourage parents, dinner staff, even teachers to basically encourage the joys of fruits and vegetables, and basically encourage them just to eat fruits and vegetables over unhealthy foods, basically increasing health in the students and reducing morbid obesity. with basically school meals being allowed in the program where possible. For example, replacing all of the unhealthy food with vegetarian food or food that is a lot more healthier, and of course, assemblies being targeted and of course being used in order to basically reinforce the message of healthy foods are good and unhealthy foods are bad. Where basically the follow-up phase is pushed where they start to reduce the prices. However, they get exposure to the fruits and veg. And this is in fact a really good way, as that after the awards procedure, they hope that the children will start to eat a lot more healthily and in fact carry this message to just eat healthily in the future, and therefore people reduce the morbid obesity rates in the UK, which it didn't really do any justice, as that people's obesity rates are still increasing. But it was supposed to do a habit format instead of doing it for permanent reward. So they were in fact trying to make it for a habit instead of mostly making it for like a permanent reward. Where quite ironically, my home city, Wolverhampton, was the first city to in fact roll out food dues citywide, where in fact began in 2009. But however, it was supposed to run to December 2011, but thanks to the local primary care trust, it was ran until December 2013, where basically it started to continue to latest 2015, where basically around May 2017 it started to go downhill, where pretty much the food dudes who basically provided the program in the UK went into liquidation, as that pretty much had debts about 1.2 million that was spent on pretty much commercials alone. So pretty much food dudes were making way less profit than the expenses that were in fact taken out, making sure that the program didn't really last long, as that pretty much they didn't make any more money. However, they couldn't make money in the merchandise that were in fact given out to schools, as that the merchandise was in fact quite cool, and that if they started to in fact charge schools or charge people to in fact buy the merchandise, who knows, they could have in fact carried it on to this day, as that they still had a constant growth of profit just to take in and spend on this program to not only expand it but also to carry on to this day. But you know, we got like the cartoon itself. Who was involved? Well, it was, of course, the heroes and the villains, where the heroes normally eat fruits and vegetables, while the villains eat junk food. Where Charlie is basically the leader, Tom is the muscle, Raz is like the brains, or again, the smart people in the gang, where Rocco is basically speed slash agility. Where on the opposite end, we have General Junkfest, who's basically the main villain of the actual live action and animation, where Mr. Mina is basically the schemer slash manipulator, who basically manipulated 20 junk punks, who are basically the henchmen slash comic relief of the gang. And also, the actual animation was in fact made by the same people who in fact made the website and made everything for Food Dudes. So pretty much before even the animation started, basically Food Dudes and the company behind the actual website and the animation had already a good relationship, as that pretty much they started to in fact make the website for Food Dudes. So it was easily cheap and a lot more affordable to do through them than through anyone else. However, what about the main prizes? As that the main prizes consist of stickers, which is one of, if not the most common rewards, with basically with food do characters, fruit or veg, or basic armor food do design, which are given out daily or after each tasting. Now meant to go on charts, books, or even clothes. Where certificates are rewarded after completing a phase of the program, where they often set things like official food dudes, fruit and veg hero, and often given out in assemblies, we basically made them feel important. Basically, using assemblies to in fact encourage students to eat a lot more healthily by giving out certificates to certain students, basically making the other students feel a little bit more jealous and encouraging them to simply achieve the certificate via completing the phase of the program. Well, basically stationery was of course very common because it's not only very cheap but also very useful, where basically pencils with the food do brandings on it, rulers, erasers, of course pencil cases, where water bottles was also given out with the branded food dudes logo slapped onto it, which is basically given out as a bigger milestone award, and is one of, if not the most memorable prize, as it is one of, if not the most unique prize in order to get. where lunch boxes were also given out, which could be lunch boxes or lunch bags, where basically they were reserved for completing the whole program or special achievements. And some of them, like, and the badges and the wristbands had a food dude badge on them, and of course, silicone wristbands were given out later in the program that were, of course, worn with pride. And that's everything you need to know about food dudes. It was, in fact, a really good program that was supposed to go global, but however, it only stuck around in Ireland because pretty much everywhere else it either not got out in the experimental phase or the company behind it usually got into bankruptcy. So that's everything you need to know. Stay safe.